Welcome to Business Beyond Borders, the go-to podcast for CPA firms seeking transformative insights. I'm your host, Laurence Whittam, and with each episode we'll uncover key insights, best practices, and invaluable resources tailored for CPAs. From trending strategies to diving deep into outsourcing and offshoring, our experts will help in all areas of your business. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Business Beyond Borders. So today it's July 4th, and it's a slightly different episode that we're doing today where I have no guests with me, and we're going to go into one of the products that I've developed to really help firms understand what they need to do in order to outsource and offshore. And we're going to go over very practical ways that now you can take away and think about whether you're at the beginning of your journey and you haven't outsourced yet and you're still looking into ways to do so, whether you have started and maybe you're having some teething issues of getting moving really and making it effective, to even if you have a sizable offshore team and you're working with them reasonably effectively, but problems come up and you know that you need some support here and there. Okay. Now, this assessment is more for a firm to do and think about themselves, because a lot of the times it's a balance, right? It's not about an outsourcing firm always making that mistake. At the end of the day, we're dealing with people a lot of the time, right? It's not a technology that you're implementing here. This is people that you're really bringing on. And as you know, there are always concerns. We have to make sure that we create an effective culture that we want people to grow in. We want people to stay with us long term. And it's the same when it comes to offshoring and outsourcing, is that you typically want to build a team that you want to stay with you long term. You don't want to have that turnover, but we also need to build a process and a system that is scalable where if somebody leaves, it's okay, right? And we're able to plug in a new person into that area to make it effective. And by having very clear ways of working, and the more and more defined you look at the process, allows you to do so and allows you to actually be way more flexible as to what that type of person is in that will fill that gap in a lot of cases. Okay. So what the product itself is a readiness assessment, right? So this is something that a firm can take away and work on themselves by answering questions across multiple categories. And these are the sort of the areas that I think every firm needs to think about before they even start working with an outsourcing provider. Okay. And now this is looking at yourself as a firm before you get into this, right? And these areas, you've got 6 or 7 categories essentially that we would look at. And the first being IT, your IT infrastructure. What does that look like? Is your system prepared to be able to have remote team members working with you, right? And not only that, but are you comfortable with the level of security and cybersecurity? And is it a big clunky way of having to log in, or is there a very clear, defined way of team members accessing the system? Is the data your data, right? Is it on your system, right? Locally? Is it hosted? Is it using a third party? What do those elements look like, right? Because you have to be comfortable with your own systems in place. A lot of third parties and outsourcing firms actually have great setups and spend a lot of money and invest a lot in their IT infrastructure and ensuring that they are secure from their end. But what I found is that you need to be comfortable with that. So you may say, hey, listen, I need to have a minimum requirement of what you've got in place, right? Or maybe you want to step above that because that helps with your comfort level. Right. But make sure you identify those things internally first because now you're able to go to a provider and really get that information from them, and you will immediately feel a lot more comfortable with the way things are working. Typically speaking, we're able to actually have outsourcing teams access our systems now, right? Whereas there's no transfer of data, everything's staying exactly where it is. So comfort levels can actually be very high when it comes to the IT side of things. And in addition to that, a lot of the software, you can put very strong restrictions on it if you would like to have a lot of control over that information, right? And the controls shouldn't be from the perspective of who you're working with from a outsourcing firm perspective to that extent. But typically speaking, when it comes to cybersecurity, and you can ask many of the IT firms that you work with or any cyber experts out there, I'm sure they will agree in that people are normally the biggest risk, right? So making sure that you have the right comfort level when it comes to the people that are being hired and doing the right due diligence on them, doing the right background checks is as important, if not more important in a lot of cases, than necessarily focusing so much on that cyber side of things, right? So it's a very important piece, but have a look at the IT infrastructure that you have. Make sure that it's effective to bring in somebody else into that. The next is process standardization. So SOPs, right? Standard operating procedures is a common term for it. And it's so important to start looking at your process, right? The more defined you are when it comes to process, the easier it becomes to hire people because you're able to essentially create a more defined role for somebody where it's less reliant on the knowledge that they have, but more reliant on can they follow the instructions clearly, right? So the better and the more defined you can be in that process and breaking it down, the less likelihood is there are questions or there is variance to work levels as well. So it's a very important factor to work on. Now, a couple of the ways that I advise to even just start taking that step, because it's very difficult for people to step back and essentially document exactly what they're doing, right? So go on Teams, go on Zoom. There are other tools in the market. I know there's one called Scribe AI as well, which seems like a great tool to utilize there. But what you can do is you can have your team members record what they're doing, right? So go start a meeting when they're about to do a client project. Okay. Record that meeting, right? Now you've got a video transcript. You've got an audio transcript, because what they can do is they can talk through what they're doing as they're doing it. And now you're actually going to have a written transcript as well. Okay. So you've got three modes there. You've got audio, you've got written, you've got visual. Okay. Now by creating that, you can now break it down. I mean, you can sit down and break it down yourselves, or you can utilize AI and you can actually get that chopped up essentially into a process for you. So now and maybe you want to tweak that. Maybe that can be a general process, but this essentially, you are creating like a training bank very specific to the client that's being worked on, right? That person may want to go over certain concerns that come up. Maybe the bank feed, let's say, for example, gets broken quite a lot in a certain client, right? You can bring that up in that video, right? But it's also there as like an FAQ side of it. You've got it in a written format as well. Okay. So the best way that I can share in order to create a process is by having your team document themselves doing it and record themselves. Now you have really spent no additional time in creating those in a lot of cases, other than you obviously need to review them, but they don't need to reinvent the wheel. They don't need to sit back and really think, oh yeah, what's the steps I do? Because they're doing it, right, on a day-to-day basis. So you can very, very quickly build up a training base, right? That now you can also, in addition to having these standard operating procedures, you can have these for trainings, and now you have standard trainings that you know for a fact that anybody being onboarded with you, they're going to go through that same onboarding, right? So they're going to have the same training. They're not going to sit with the same person, and maybe they explain some of the FAQ, or they explain some of the process, or they miss out on a few things just because they were having an off day, right? Or maybe they just missed something in a training, for example. By documenting it and having it there in a video format, and as they're doing it, you've got more of a guarantee that it's going to have been done correctly, right, and appropriately, and covered everything every time. Okay. And as things get uncovered that maybe were missed, you can add to it, right? So that's would be a great way to start your SOPs if you don't already have them in place. Okay. And even some of these tools can take out certain sensitive information, blur it out, right? So now you can clearly make it by doing the work that you're currently doing. Okay. So I highly recommend that, because I find a lot of people that I work with struggle to really create a clear standard operating procedure. But this is a great way to do it. Okay. The next, cultural and strategic alignment. Okay. And when we talk about that, is you need to look internally first. Do you have any internal problems with your culture, right? Do you have any problems with team members not necessarily getting an understanding for your roadmap from a firm perspective, where you're going? Okay. And identifying the why internally as to why you're even looking at outsourcing or offshoring. Okay. Because one of the concerns I get when I'm in a firm working with them, not from a partner level, but more from a staff level in a lot of cases, is there becomes pushback because maybe they feel threatened by the chance of losing a job, when in the majority of cases, right, that's not the reason for doing it, right? The reason for doing it is that you want to provide them more time, and you want to make sure that they're not spending 60 to 80 hours during the tax season, for example, right? And that's the vision and the thought process behind it a lot of the times in the senior leadership. But that why message isn't necessarily translated across the firm. Okay. So that's where making sure that culture and that strategic alignment is there. And also at the top level, making sure your partners understand that why you're doing it, the reasoning behind it, and really making sure they're all on board with it. Right. And what I've seen in a lot of cases is less so that they're not on board because they really just don't want to do it at all. But a lot of the times it's because of a lack of education around it, right? A lack of understanding around what that could look like. What are the risks, right? And being a risk adverse profession in a lot of cases, right? This is where educating and making sure that everybody's talked through it and you've got guidance there is very important. Okay. Communication structures, another huge piece. Okay. Now we're working with different people in different countries in a lot of cases, right? Now there's different culture. There's people with language barriers. There's people with different personal needs than yourselves. And this is where having that communication strategy and structure set up properly, it means that you're able to try and eliminate a lot of these problems that come up from miscommunication, right? And what I mean by that is there needs to be a very clear way that they're communicating with you, right? Do you want them to communicate with you all throughout the day and you're very approachable from an open door policy? Okay. They're not sat next to you, right? So it becomes a bit more difficult from an individual's perspective, reaching out to a partner or somebody senior than them, not knowing if they're going to be on a call with a client, not knowing if they're going to be busy, and not wanting to disturb their work and disrupt them, right? And feel like you're necessarily like annoying them in some cases, right? That's the concern that resonates with people in a lot of cases. And more so, I would say, with a lot of cultures like in the Philippines, like in India, right? They don't want to do that. So making sure that you have very clear structures as to, yes, I really want you to reach out to me. It's never disturbing me. Or send me a message on Teams throughout the day, right? Or you have very structured meetings that are, hey, listen, we're going to have a daily call. This is the time it's going to be at, and we're going to go over X, Y, Z. And then as you start to build those relationships, typically things then open up. Okay. And same thing, you may prefer a message at the end of the day with like here are the tasks that this person has worked on, here's a report, here are any questions, and you may not want it throughout the day, right? You may not want those disturbances, right? Now, everybody is a little bit different. So making sure there are options for your team is very important, and making sure you understand the type of person that your staff is a very important piece to it as well. And then the final element that we sort of look at is sort of the financial and the compliance side of things. And what I mean by that is a lot of the times I see firms saying, hey, I need to hire somebody, or I need to go outsource right now because we have this need and demand. But when you look at utilization or realization across the firm, there's actually a big gap between how effective some of the talent is being used, and especially when you start to add numerous offices, you'll actually find that there is people that you currently have that could actually take on that work. So the question becomes, if they're not able to work with somebody in a different office within the company already, then how easy is it going to be to then add the cultural mix to it as well, like in terms of working with somebody halfway across the world, right? And what it comes down to is making sure that you've actually really thought about this, right? Making sure that you are utilizing people effectively across the firm, but also making sure that you've really put a plan in place and you're investing in the new talent, right, that is coming up, because it's very much like you're opening up a new office, right? And it's not that plug and play approach that many vendors will tell you it is, right? This is people we're dealing with, right? So people that need to have time training with you, need to have the investment from you to ensure they understand what you want from them, right? And they personally have their own goals, right? And career paths that they want to be following. So now you have to think about those elements as well. Okay. So this is where that assessment element, right? And you going and sitting and thinking to yourself across these areas is so vastly important. Okay. And again, if you need help with this, we've got this tool now, right, that has been developed. So you're able to come, there's a self-assessment version. I have a more detailed version where I work with firms more hands-on, and I'm able to, again, sit with the partners and actually go over from an interview perspective, right, to ensure that everybody is on the same page, right? And then there is very clear custom advice that comes from the assessment then going forward. But for the smaller firms that can assess themselves, right, and they have less of the change management elements and less people to necessarily work with and train on that side of things, all these elements can be worked on over time, right? They don't need to be done tomorrow, right, is the big thing, but they need to be started, right? They need to be thought about, because as you are now working with an outsourcing firm or an offshoring firm and you are starting that process, you're taking somebody on, right? So you're going to be onboarding, you're going to be training, you're going to be working on specific projects. You're also going to be having feedback and errors and improvements that are needing to be made. So the more you can record and document these as you're going along, the more you can build out your training manual, essentially, in a lot of cases. And I build out essentially quite a large playbook for firms so that they have elements of everything there, right? At the end, they have elements of all the training that has gone on, right? They have documentation. They've thought about the reporting. They've got a clear vision as to why they're doing it, what it's going to look like, a roadmap in place. So, but you're able to create that playbook essentially yourself by following this framework from the assessment, right? If you really wanted to. And typically with a small firm, you don't need to necessarily spend hours and hours and hours at one time and reinvent the wheel now. There's a framework to doing this and having more success when outsourcing or offshoring. So that's what I wanted to cover today, to give you, and again, this is taking a lot of the elements of what a lot of our offshoring vendors have come to us and talked about over some of these episodes. And again, it's sort of bringing everything together into one area so that a firm can now take away and really assess themselves and start moving in the right direction and have framework to now go off. Okay. And having that time and investing that time into this is vitally important to being one of those firms that really succeeds at outsourcing and offshoring, to being one of the ones that, again, has had a bad experience, right? And hasn't been able to make it work for whatever reason. Okay. So it's hitting the refresh button and making sure you are prepared. So everybody, I want to wish you all a happy 4th of July. And again, I hope this episode has been super helpful. I'm sure you weren't sat by the pool listening to this. And I hope you weren't, right? I hope there was music on instead, because I'm sure that would have been a lot better. But I hope you're able to sit the following week, right, and really listen to this and break it down and look into this outsourcing readiness assessment as an option for your firm to be able to get a good understanding of where you currently sit, right, and be able to put a plan that is effective into place to be able to have a more successful time offshoring and outsourcing. And I look forward to seeing everybody on the next episode of Business Beyond Borders. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to Business Beyond Borders. I'm Laurence Whittam, and it's been a pleasure bringing you impactful insights tailored for the modern CPA firm. Remember, the world of accounting is vast and ever evolving, and we're here to navigate it together. For more resources and episodes, don't forget to subscribe and reach out to our experts. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of your business and explore the limitless possibilities beyond borders.